Hello, my name is Amber Batanzas, and today I will be discussing police brutality with a very special guest, Fernando Batanzas. Before I bring him in, I would just like to give you a brief background of who I am and where I come from. I am a woman of color, if you couldn't tell already. Both of my parents are from Dominican Republic, but I was born and raised in America. We currently reside in the city of Clifton, New Jersey, with a population of 85,000. According to the citydata.com, Clifton, New Jersey has a 50.5 has a population of 50.5 whites, 33.5 Hispanics, and 4.6 blacks. I have given you that information just to give you an understanding of the demographics. I moved to Clifton when I was 11 years old, and within months, I experienced my first encounter with racism from my neighbors. For my final project, I've decided to interview my brother on police brutality. Unfortunately, he was a victim of it at an early age, living in Clifton, New Jersey. He is and always has been a very scholarly young man and almost always kept to himself. So when this happened, we were all very, very astonished and surprised that it did. Yeah. Introducing Fernando Batanzas. This is my brother, Fernando Batanzas.
Hi.
First question. How old were you when the incident happened?
16?
Okay. What year was that?
It's 2015 now. I'm 23, so let's see. 3 and 4 was 7. So 7 years ago, 2008?
Okay. What exactly were you doing before the police arrived?
I was play fighting with my friend.
And when you say play fighting?
Just wrestling.
Okay. And where were you?
I was in front of my friend's house.
The person that you were play fighting with?
No,
you were in front of his house?
It was another friend.
Okay. And where was that friend?
He was on the steps of his house.
Okay. And what did the police say and do before they arrested you?
Firstly, there was a police officer in regular clothed garments, didn't have any identification on him.
Mm-hmm.
So when he arrived, didn't know particularly who he was. He pointed to me and my friend, and he asked us where we live. Me being a 16-year-old kid, I responded with my house. Promptly, he called in for reinforcements to arrest me and my other 16-year-old friend.
And where was the person that lived there?
In his house. Our friend's dad was in there.
And he didn't do anything to stop or confront the police?
Not particularly, no.
And what nationality was your friend?
He was Arabic.
And the person that you were plane fighting with?
Oh, I'm sorry. The person I was play fighting with. The person I was play fighting with was Arabic. The person who lived in the house was Asian.
Okay. And did you know that according to Black Lives Matter, eliminating race inequality in the criminal justice system, several surveys conducted between 2002 and 2008 have shown that Hispanics were up to twice as likely and blacks were up to 3 times as likely as whites to experience physical force or its threat during most recent contact with police. So when you were arrested, did you feel violent? Was it violent? Were they?
It wasn't particularly violent, but the language that they used, particularly targeting me personally when I was being arrested, whereas in what do you think you are? You're not in Patterson, which is actually an inner city right close by to Clifton, kind of shows the mindset invoked by the police in the area when it comes to people of certain nationalities.
What nationality were the police?
White.
Both, the one undercover and the one that arrested you?
Both. The one that on the cover was the one that arrested me. He had another one show up to arrest us.
And what followed the arrest?
Um, we were kited into small separate area. Um, I think we had our mugshots taken, our fingerprints, whatever, and yeah, that's what ensued. It was general name calling, making fun of my last name. That was used, but yeah, the general language it wasn't really physical, but the general language did suggest a certain mindset towards certain individuals.
And how did you feel during the arrest?
Annoyed personally. I mean, I really wasn't particularly scared. More just, well, the only person I was scared for was my mother and how she would take it. But me personally, I was just annoyed at the lack of professionalism that these people ensued in a very upstanding position. They took this as just like like a normal day in the job, just minorities, or it's just like, oh, we have to just target these kids almost. This is just another day in the job, just to invoke something out of them.
Were you with your friend
Yes.
during all this was happening?
Yes.
And were you guys held in a prison cell or just like detained?
It was just detained.
Okay. Were you angered by it?
Again, not particularly. I was still more just annoyed. I mean, I think the only anger I could say that I would have is just towards the police officers and their lack of professionalism. I mean, they were handling all this almost like if it was a drug bust of hard hitting drugs when you're just arresting two teenage boys play fighting in front of their friend's house, which I believe somewhere might say that's illegal since we were not in the accompaniment of anyone that we know, no guardianship or anything.
According to Stop and Frisk, the human impact also mentioned that community members do not feel protected by the NYPD, and many feel that important issues are not being addressed, in part because the city is pouring. According to the Stop and Frisk, the human impact also mentioned that community members do not feel protected by the NYPD, and many feel that important issues are not being addressed, in part because the city is pouring excessive resources into Stop and Frisk. And do you feel the same way? Especially in cities like New York, where Stop and Frisk are such recurring activities, and it's towards innocent people.
The thing that I dislike about Stop and Frisk is that I've seen a video where a man, a Caucasian man, was, and he openly addressed this himself. He was actually voicing this that he was personally walking around, or actually, this might have been an article, mind you, that he was personally walking around with spray cans, things like that, and he tried to make himself seem like an individual who was going to cause some sort of mischief. And he was stopped at a crosswalk, and a police officer looked him over and said, "What are you going to do? What are you going to do with those paint cans?" He just verbally said, "Mind your own business," and the police grumbled. Not soon after, a minority of I think Hispanic descent was running or across the street. Immediately, the police officer took off directly after him, as if he was the criminal. I think the problem with Stop and Frisk is that there's obviously a prejudice to who you would think is going to commit a crime. Um, if anything, the problem with that is that you're being aggressive towards individuals who you may or may not know are committing a crime, and that puts people in a state of fear, in a state of mistrust. Why would anyone want to trust somebody who automatically thinks that you're a bad person? Um, furthermore, it cuts off any form of conversation that the community can have with the police to actually do things in a proper way to better the neighborhood. I mean, honestly, we have the no snitching kind of mentality that holds within a lot of inner cities, and a lot of that has to do with like if someone's going to tell something about something in a certain area, right? Police offer very little to no protection for that person. They're still caught within an area. The police are acting in a very slow manner. It's almost they don't even care for the lives, even in the instance where they want to have a conversation. So now I'm instilling further fear, further mistrust in that is just damaging it more. It doesn't make for any progressive movement in those environments. And obviously, no one's going to do something or actively do something illegal when there's someone already looking to stop and frisk. All you're gonna do is make people avoid certain areas, but at the same time they still can carry it out because they know they're there. They just wait till you leave and they'll do it anyway. Otherwise, they're not gonna carry them on their person anything they might do illegally to begin with when you're in the area. But as soon as you take off, it's going to happen regardless because no one's going to stop them. No one's going to seek your aid to stop the situation, and it's going to continue otherwise.
I like that you said that because I was actually reading an article and it's called Insight, and it's about imprisoned women and how they're treated and how these women who go through domestic violence, they seek help, but they don't get the help that they need. For example, under mandatory arrest laws, there have been numerous incidents where police officers called to domestic incidents have arrested the woman who is being battered. So it's like, where do these people go for help when what they're told is supposed to help them isn't helping them, but actually putting them in even more harm's way? But going back to the interview, the article Black Lives Matter also mentioned the cumulative effect of these policies is that 49% of African American men reported have been arrested by age 23, in contrast to 38% of their non-white Hispanic white counterparts. How does that make you feel to be a part of the statistic?
Makes me feel like a number. Makes me feel like in an eventuality, I'm going to have my constitutional rights violated, and I can do nothing about it. Uh, what is more to say? I feel fear. I mean, what is there to fear? Apparently, what is there to fear? The inevitable. It's going to happen to me, and I feel like that's a lot of things that are going through a lot of people's minds. It's almost just like, why do anything? And on both sides of that, it's just why do anything against it? Why fight it if nothing's going to change? And that's more to say is, why should I try to fight against something when people are given complete authoritative power over me without question? And there isn't a problem in of itself. Anybody who willingly recites, quotes the constitutional rights of all Americans, especially, let's say, for the more conservative side of things, for gun rights and everything, can't seem to argue these points, and they bring up the points of, like, if you're not going to do a crime, that if you're not doing anything bad, obviously you're not going to get stopped. No, that is not the situation. The inevitability is that regardless of the situation that I'm in, I am seen as a criminal, and this is what's happening with the stop and frisk laws.
If there was one thing you would have done differently at the time, what would it be?
At the time, honestly, I probably would have just, if I had known he was a police officer, I probably would have just given my information. That would have been it. Regardless of which, given all circumstances, even regardless of what would I've said, aside from an insult or something aggressive, he still had no right to arrest me.
Especially since he wasn't in his uniform.
Exactly.
He was just a stranger to you.
To me, he was, yes.
Do you believe there should be a push towards community-based projects that rely less on the criminal justice system, like mentioned in Insight, which in Insight said, develop community-based responses to violence that do not rely on criminal justice system and which have mechanisms that ensure safety and accountability for survivors of sexual and domestic violence or other violence? Do you feel that there should be more community activism and more community involvement that stops or that kind of, what's the word? I'm drawing a blank. But you get what I mean, right?
I understand what you mean. You mean more of a community incentive versus a law enforcement incentive.
Exactly.
I believe there should be a combination of both. The reason being is that even if you can have a support system, right? But if you have no type of enforcement to act against things that are actively happening, right? People will do it free without question. Yes, you always need a bedrock for something. You always need a support, right? That's where the community comes in. Having people naturally try to deter things with more community incentives to focus on schools, focus on any after school activities. That is a major focus for deterring crime. It is. It always has been. Education helps aid in that, as well as more community involvement. If more and more people in a certain area were to look out for each other, as well as not feel fear when it came to having to report something. The problem with it is that, yes, you have a community. You have a community of people, right? And something you would do in a family, I'm just going to say this plainly. Would you really tell something on someone who's doing something bad who you consider family? That is a difficult thing to swallow, and that's where the enforcement side of things comes in. Sometimes people are not so willing to tell on other people because there's the concept of family. You live with your neighbor, right? And there's an aspect of fear to that. People are just so restrained to doing so. First things first, you have to do is kind of just have a communication. It's not simply just a communication between the community. It has to be between the community and the enforcement. Also, there has to be less of emphasis on enforcing non-violent crimes, specifically the issues with the drug laws, the draconic drug laws, holding only a certain amount of weed, of cocaine, or anything like that without doing anything violent, and then being sent off for jail for 25 plus years is asinine. It's ridiculous, and that just put greater emphasis of not wanting to report such a thing because first off, there's the issue that you're putting somebody away, and then there's the ensuing backlash from anybody who found out about it. There needs to be a communication. If there's an issue with, let's say, drugs, let's just keep with that. Communication for more of rehabilitation, trying to ease people out of those situations. And enforcement needs to back that up without us being something of a military trying to crack on this down. Be a part of the community. If they see someone dealing with certain types of issues just like that, do not directly do it with force. Yes, the law says something, but you don't have to completely live by that law to destroy someone's life. You could have been in the same situation. The problem with a lot of police officers is that power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts, and that is the scenario that we're having here. They just follow the laws by the book and do not account for being human.
But what if you are taking into consideration communities that are populated by people of color, and these people of color aren't seeing any justice because their justice system is so corrupt, and the people that they know, the neighbors that they see their neighbors and their family members just being arrested, being stopped and frisked. It's kind of like this never-ending cycle. Like, what about them? What about those people that can't find justice in our justice system? Do you feel like there should be more community-based, more education, more community-based with them than, for example, the city of Clifton?
For those areas that have to deal with those certain situations, right? On the bedrock, they have to build it within the community first. Right? Mind you, there still has to be some conversation with enforcement, but obviously there's an layer of mistrust considering everything that's wrong with it. So at first they must build it within themselves to try to reduce anything that could happen to them, to within their community. Right? They need to build their community up first. again, then becomes more of a social issue. Is how do you build something up that's already inherently impoverished and within those areas? Um, hard to build something up when you have nothing to start with. Regardless of which, I feel personally that in those areas it really has to come from within themselves first and foremost. Trying to build a community within themselves um, before really trying to enact enforcement, because obviously enforcement's already lacking. It's already corrupt. So yes, in those areas, first and foremost, they have to build it up. Education, activities, whatever they have to do, they have to look into themselves before they look outwards, because they're obviously not getting the help they need.
Thanks, brother.
Okay, sister.
Peace. Peace and love and prosperity.
Deuces.